Welcome to Compact Warfare from CompactHistories.com, the show where we explore key moments from the history of conflict, from ancient battlefields to modern warfare. This is episode 86, the Siege of Nicaea. Nicaea occupied a position of considerable strategic importance in northwestern Asia Minor. Standing on the eastern shore of Lake Ascanius, close to the routes linking Constantinople with the Anatolian interior, it had long been one of the Byzantine Empire's most important cities. Its proximity to the imperial capital meant that whoever controlled Nicaea could threaten the approaches to the Bosporus or protect them. The city was also surrounded by formidable Roman and Byzantine defences, including high walls, towers, ditches, and the lake itself. Byzantine authority across Asia Minor weakened rapidly following the defeat at Manzikert in 1071. Turkish groups moved westwards, sometimes as conquerors and sometimes as mercenaries employed in Byzantine civil wars. Around 1081, Süleyman ibn Kutalmış established his authority at Nicaea and made it the capital of the newly formed Seljuk Sultanate of Rûm. The loss placed a Turkish political and military centre within striking distance of Constantinople. Süleyman died in 1086, and a period of instability followed before his son, Kilij Arslan I, established himself as Sultan in 1092. Kilij Arslan faced rival Turkish rulers as well as the Byzantine Empire. Of particular importance were the Danish Mendids, whose territory lay farther east. Competition between the two powers centered on cities such as Melitene, modern Malatya, and prevented the Turkish rulers of Anatolia from presenting a united front. The first Western army to approach Nicaea did little to change Kilij Arslan's priorities. In 1096, the poorly organized expedition commonly called the People's Crusade crossed the Bosporus. Its members included minor knights, pilgrims, and non-combatants, many of whom ignored Byzantine instructions and began raiding territory around Nicaea. Kilij Arslan's forces destroyed most of the expedition near Sivatok on the 21st of October. Peter the Hermit, one of its principal preachers, survived because he was in Constantinople at the time. The ease of that victory influenced Kilij Arslan's response to later reports of Western troops arriving in Byzantine territory. He appears to have assumed that the newcomers were no more capable than those already defeated. Leaving his family, treasury, and garrison at Nicaea, he turned his attention eastwards to the struggle for Melitene. This judgment would prove costly. The forces assembling at Constantinople during the winter of 1096 and the spring of 1097 were led by experienced nobles and contained thousands of trained soldiers. Unlike the People's Crusade, they possessed cavalry, equipment, and organized contingents drawn from several parts of Western Europe. Nicaea now stood directly in their path. The main armies of the First Crusade reached Constantinople separately rather than as a single unified force. Their leaders included Godfrey of Bouillon, Bohemond of Taranto, Raymond IV of Toulouse, and Robert II of Flanders. Robert of Normandy and Stephen of Blois followed later. Each commander retained authority over his own contingent, and no overall military leader had been appointed. Emperor Alexios I. Komnenos regarded their arrival with a mixture of hope and concern. He had requested Western military assistance against the Turks, but he had expected manageable bodies of mercenaries rather than several independent armies. Some of the Crusader leaders were also former enemies of Byzantium. Bohemond had participated in the Norman invasion of Byzantine territory during the 1080s, making Alexios particularly wary of his intentions. Before allowing the armies to cross into Asia Minor, Alexios attempted to secure promises from their commanders. The precise wording probably varied, but the central requirement was that former Byzantine territories recovered from the Turks should be returned to imperial rule. In exchange, the emperor provided supplies, guides, transport, and military assistance. Most leaders eventually accepted an oath, although Raymond of Toulouse resisted its feudal implications and Tancred initially avoided taking it. The agreement immediately made Nicaea an important test. The city was both a necessary objective for the Crusaders and a former Byzantine possession claimed by Alexios. Leaving it in Turkish hands would expose the crusaders' supply route and allow Kilij Arslan to attack their rear as they marched inland. Capturing it, however, raised the question of whether the city would be handed to the emperor or treated as a prize of conquest. Crusader contingents began crossing the Bosporus in the spring of 1097. They travelled through Nicomedia and followed a route towards Nicaea, clearing sections of road where necessary. Godfrey's troops were among the first to reach the city in early May, followed by Bohemond and other commanders. The initial arrivals experienced food shortages, but Bohemond helped organise supplies arriving by both land and sea. Byzantine logistical support remained essential to feeding the growing army. Raymond of Toulouse and Adhémar of Le Puy, the Pope's representative, were still approaching when preparations began. Byzantine troops accompanied the expedition under commanders, including Tatikios and Manuel Boutumitz, while Alexios remained behind the main army at Pelicanum. His position kept him close enough to monitor events without placing himself inside the Crusader camp. By the middle of May, the Western contingents were taking up positions around Nicaea. Their leaders now faced the practical problem of surrounding one of the strongest fortified cities in Asia Minor, while remaining alert for the return of its absent Sultan. The formal siege began on the 14th of May 1097, although some medieval accounts give slightly different dates for the first attacks. The Crusaders divided responsibility for the landward defences. Bohemond's contingent occupied the northern sector, while Godfrey of Bouillon and troops from Germany and Lorraine covered another part of the perimeter. When Raymond of Toulouse and Adhémar of Le Puy arrived, they took up positions facing the southern and eastern approaches. Nicaea's fortifications presented a serious challenge. Its walls enclosed a large area and were reinforced by numerous towers, allowing defenders to fire along the approaches from several directions. Watercourses filled or strengthened sections of the ditch outside the walls. The garrison possessed bows, stone-throwing machines, and elevated positions from which it could attack anyone attempting to approach the masonry. The Crusaders could prevent movement through most of the city's landward gates, but they could not completely surround it. Nicaea's western wall ran beside Lake Ascanius, and the Crusader army had no suitable vessels on the water. Boats could therefore carry messages, supplies, and possibly reinforcements into the city. Unless the lake route was closed, the defenders could maintain contact with friendly territory and prolong their resistance. The attackers began constructing siege equipment from locally available timber. Their machines included stone throwers, protective screens, and wooden structures designed to bring soldiers closer to the walls. Siege warfare required carpenters, miners, and labourers, as well as fighting men. The army also had to gather food and animal fodder, while maintaining guard positions over an extensive perimeter. The defenders did not remain passive. On the 16th of May, Turkish troops reportedly made a sortie from the city, but the attackers drove them back. Messages were then sent to Kilij Arslan, warning him that Nicaea was facing a far larger and better organised army than the force destroyed at Civito. The Sultan abandoned his eastern campaign and hurried westwards with mounted troops. The staggered arrival of Crusader contingents created an opportunity for him. Raymond's army approached the city before it had fully established its camp, leaving the southern sector temporarily vulnerable. Kilij Arslan planned to strike from the surrounding hills, break through the incomplete siege line, and reinforce the garrison. Crusader scouts and local intelligence provided some warning, although the exact sequence is unclear because the Latin accounts differ. Raymond's troops reached their assigned position at a critical moment, while other contingents prepared to support them. The siege was about to become a battle fought outside the walls. Kilij Arslan's relief force appeared in the hills south of Nicaea on or around the 21st of May. His army consisted largely of mounted archers accustomed to fighting across the open terrain of Anatolia. Their mobility allowed them to approach rapidly, release arrows, and withdraw before heavily armoured opponents could close with them. The Sultan hoped to exploit gaps in the Crusader positions and reach one of the city's gates. The timing initially appeared favourable. Raymond of Toulouse and Adhémar of Le Puy had only recently reached the siege, and their troops were still establishing their camp. One Turkish group attempted to engage them while another moved towards the city. Raymond's men nevertheless formed for battle, and troops commanded by Robert of Flanders and other leaders reinforced the threatened sector. Fighting continued for much of the day. Turkish mounted archers repeatedly attacked the Crusader lines, while Western cavalry attempted to force them into close combat. The city's defenders could see the engagement from the walls, but were unable to create a decisive opening from within. Kilij Arslan had expected an army similar to the one he had destroyed at Sivto. Instead, he encountered several organized contingents capable of supporting one another. The Crusaders' numerical strength and defensive positions eventually prevented the relief army from breaking through. Kilij Arslan withdrew after suffering substantial losses, although surviving sources provide no reliable casualty totals. His retreat did not destroy the Sultanate of Rûm, but it ended the immediate attempt to relieve Nicaea. According to later reports, the Sultan advised the garrison to make whatever arrangements it considered necessary. Both sides used brutality as a form of psychological warfare. Latin chroniclers describe crusaders beheading Turkish dead and throwing some of the heads into the city. Other heads were reportedly sent to Emperor Alexios as evidence of the victory. Such accounts were written to celebrate Crusader success and must be treated carefully, but the practice of displaying enemy remains was not unusual in medieval warfare. The battle altered the defenders' position. They could no longer expect Kilij Arslan to break the siege in the immediate future, while additional Crusader forces continued to arrive. Robert of Normandy and Stephen of Blois joined the army in early June, increasing the pressure on the city. Victory outside the walls did not, however, provide a way inside them. The Crusaders still had to overcome Nicaea's masonry, towers and determined garrison. Most importantly, vessels continued to cross Lake Ascanius. Kilij Arslan had been driven away, but the siege itself remained unresolved. With Kilij Arslan's field army gone, the Crusaders concentrated on breaching Nicaea's defences. They bombarded the walls with stone-throwing machines and used protective screens to move troops and workers closer. Repeated attacks tested different sections, but the towers allowed the defenders to subject approaching soldiers to arrows and stones. The strength of the fortifications prevented a rapid assault. Raymond of Toulouse's contingent targeted a tower on the eastern or southeastern side of the city. Miners worked beneath it while crossbowmen and archers attempted to suppress the defenders above. They supported the tower's foundations with wooden beams and then burned the timbers, causing part of the structure to collapse. Darkness fell before the Crusaders could exploit the damage, and the defenders rebuilt the opening during the night. Other devices were less successful. Anna Komnene described a protective structure designed by a Crusader engineer that allowed men to approach the walls while shielded from missiles. The defenders responded by dropping heavy stones onto it, killing or injuring those underneath. These episodes demonstrated that the besiegers possessed useful technical skills, but they had not yet found a reliable means of entering the city. The continued use of Lake Ascanius was the central problem. The Crusaders had no naval force at Nicaea, and the lake could not be reached directly by Byzantine warships from the sea. The commanders therefore requested help from Alexios. The emperor ordered small vessels to be taken to Civito on the Gulf of Nicomedia and transported overland to the lake. Oxen and teams of men hauled the boats across the intervening ground. The operation required careful preparation because Alexios wanted the vessels to appear on the lake without giving the defenders time to respond. Byzantine troops, including Turcopoles trained in forms of warfare used by Turkish forces, crewed the boats. They were launched under cover of darkness and appeared off Nicaea on the morning of the 17th of June. The sudden arrival of an imperial flotilla closed the city's remaining supply and communication route. Nicaea was now blockaded by land and water, while the Crusader army continued to grow outside its walls. The defenders knew that another relief attempt was unlikely and that a successful western assault could lead to the city being stormed and plundered. Negotiations with Byzantine representatives now offered an alternative. Manuel Butumitz had authority to discuss terms, and Alexios was prepared to guarantee the safety of the garrison and civilian population. The military contest was becoming a diplomatic one, conducted partly without the knowledge of the crusader rank and file. Manuel Butumitz negotiated with the Turkish commanders while the crusaders prepared another general attack. Emperor Alexios wanted Nicaea recovered intact, not destroyed in a sack. He also wished to prevent the crusaders from acquiring its treasury and establishing independent control over a city so close to Constantinople. For the defenders, surrender to Byzantium offered better prospects than waiting for the walls to be breached. The final arrangements were implemented during the night of the 18th to the 19th of June. Byzantine troops entered the city by the lakeside, while imperial forces and crusaders conducted or prepared attacks elsewhere. On the morning of the 19th of June, the emperor's standards appeared above Nicaea's walls. The city had surrendered to Alexios rather than being taken by a direct crusader assault. Many crusaders reacted angrily. They had endured weeks of fighting and expected the right to loot the city after its capture. Instead, Byzantine guards controlled the gates and admitted Westerners only in small groups. The Turkish garrison and leading families, including members of Kilij Arslan's household, were taken into imperial custody. Alexios later treated the Sultan's family leniently and released them without demanding a ransom. The emperor attempted to reduce the resulting resentment by distributing money, horses, robes, and other gifts to the leading knights. Food and arms were provided to ordinary soldiers and poorer pilgrims. Some Latin accounts nevertheless accused Alexios of betrayal, while Byzantine sources presented his conduct as prudent and generous. Both traditions reflected the political interests and suspicions of their authors. Modern scholarship confirms that the gifts were substantial, even if they did not replace the plunder anticipated by the army. For Byzantium, the recovery of Nicaea was a major strategic achievement. It removed the Seljuk capital from the immediate approaches to Constantinople and provided a base for the restoration of imperial authority in Western Asia Minor. Kilij Arslan transferred the center of his power farther inland, eventually establishing his capital at Iconium, modern Konya. The Crusader army left Nicaea on the 26th of June, dividing into two columns to make movement and foraging easier. Byzantine troops under Tatikios accompanied the expedition, partly to guide it and partly to ensure that other recovered imperial territories were returned to Alexios. On the 1st of July, Kilij Arslan attacked the leading column near Dorylaeum, beginning the next major engagement of the campaign. Nicaea had been the First Crusade's first large-scale military success. It also exposed the conflicting expectations within the Christian alliance. Cooperation had delivered the city, but arguments over its possession left suspicions that would continue throughout the march towards Antioch. That brings us to the end of this episode of Compact Warfare, part of the Compact Histories Network. Please don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you are listening so that you don't miss any future episodes. And consider leaving us a rating or a review, as it really helps new listeners find the show. You can find new episodes at compacthistories.com, where you can also explore our other podcasts covering biographies, history, science, mysteries, true crime, and disasters. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. Finally, please consider supporting the show directly by buying us a coffee. Head on over to compacthistories.com/warfare and click on the coffee cup to see how. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.